The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Its metal walls stretched for miles in every direction. Lights blinked on and off across its surface like tiny stars. Inside the station's biggest meeting room, representatives from 12 different alien species sat around a huge circular table. Admiral Quan De Ho sat quietly in his chair. His dark hair was neat and his uniform was clean and simple. Unlike the other aliens who wore bright colors and strange decorations, Quan looked plain and ordinary. His face showed no emotion as he listened to the heated discussion around him. The room was filled with angry voices and worried whispers. At the center of the table, a hologram showed the outer edge of their galaxy. Red dots marked the places where entire star systems had disappeared. The red area was growing bigger every day. "The Void Swarm has destroyed another 6 systems this week," said Thexara, the Velkan fleet commander. She was tall and covered in green scales that reflected the room's lights. Her yellow eyes glowed with anger. "At this rate, they will reach our homeworlds in 3 months." The creature sitting across from her made a clicking sound. Nixolan was from the Hiver species. His body looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that never stopped moving. "My calculations show the swarm has 2.7 million ships," he said in his mechanical voice. "Each ship is approximately 300 meters long. They move as one mind and adapt to any weapon we use against them." Other aliens around the table began talking at once. The Zephyrians, who looked like walking trees, rustled their leaves nervously. The crystal beings called prisms made musical sounds that meant they were afraid. The small furry Takari species chattered in their high-pitched voices. "Silence," roared General Vextar from the Brutok Empire. He stood up, all 3 meters of his muscular frame casting a shadow over the table. His red skin was marked with battle scars. "We did not come here to panic like younglings. We came here to plan war." Thexara nodded her scaled head. "The general speaks truth. The Velkan Navy will contribute our full war fleet, 10,000 heavy cruisers, 20,000 destroyers, and 50,000 fighter craft. Our ships have quantum shields and plasma cannons that can melt through any armor." Nixolan's compound eyes focused on her. "The Hiver Collective will deploy 90,000 drone fighters and 30,000 support vessels. Our swarm tactics will overwhelm their formations while our analytical computers find weaknesses in their defenses." One by one, each species pledged their military forces. The Brutoks promised their massive battleships. The Zephyrians offered their nature-based weapons that could grow through enemy hulls. The Prisms would use their light-based technology to blind and confuse the swarm. Even the small Takari species promised to send their fast scout ships. When the pledges were finished, over 400,000 warships had been promised to the fight. The room felt more hopeful. Such a massive fleet had never been assembled before. Then Thexara turned to Admiral Quan. "What of Earth? How many ships will humanity contribute to our alliance?" All eyes in the room focused on the human admiral. Quan had been sitting quietly throughout the entire meeting. He had not spoken once or shown any reaction to the terrible news about the swarm. Now he looked calmly around the table at all the alien faces staring at him. "Humanity will send 1 ship," Quan said in a quiet voice. The room went completely silent for several seconds. Then it exploded into chaos. "1 ship?" Thexara's voice rose to a shriek. "Did you say 1 ship?" "That is mathematically impossible." Nixolan clicked rapidly. 1 ship represents 0.0025% of our total force. This cannot be a serious military contribution. General Vextar slammed his massive fist on the table. "Is this human cowardice or human stupidity? Your species claims to be our equals. Yet you send a single vessel to fight millions?" The other aliens joined in the outrage. They demanded explanations. Some accused humans of being afraid to fight. Others suggested that Earth was secretly planning to abandon the alliance. The small Takari representative squeaked that maybe humans didn't understand how dangerous the swarm was. Through all the shouting and accusations, Admiral Quan remained calm. He waited patiently for the noise to die down. When the room finally became quiet again, he spoke in the same steady voice. "The ship will be called the Indomitable. It will represent Earth's complete commitment to this alliance and the defense of our galaxy. 1. Ship cannot defend anything. Against the Void Swarm," Thexara hissed. "What kind of ship could possibly make such a difference? Do humans possess some secret superweapon?" Quan smiled slightly, but his eyes remained serious. "The Indomitable Will is a prototype vessel. It incorporates our most advanced technology and represents decades of human scientific research. Prototype? Nixaland's mechanical voice became more interested. What are its specifications? What weapon systems does it carry? How large is its crew complement? That information is classified, Quan replied. I can only tell you that the ship will arrive at the designated battle coordinates on schedule. This answer made the aliens even more angry. Thexara stood up from her chair, her scales turning a darker shade of green. You expect us to trust our lives to your mysterious single ship? While we bring hundreds of thousands of vessels, you contribute one and refuse to explain what makes it special. The Velkin fleet will not fight alongside cowards or fools, General Vexitar declared. If humans are too afraid to commit proper forces, perhaps they should not be part of this alliance at all. Other species began agreeing with the Velkins. The room filled with angry voices again. Some aliens suggested removing Earth from the alliance entirely. Others worried that the human ship might be a spy vessel meant to steal alien technology during the battle. Admiral Quan listened to all of this without changing expression. When the anger reached its peak, he stood up slowly. His movement was so calm and deliberate that it somehow made the room grow quiet again. I understand your concerns, he said. From your perspective, one ship seems inadequate against such a threat. But I ask you to remember something important. He walked to the holographic display showing the galaxy. With one finger, he pointed to a small system near the edge of human territory. 3 years ago, the Raider clans attacked this system with 50,000 ships. The human colony there had only 200 defenders and no military vessels. According to all military calculations, the colony should have fallen in minutes. The aliens looked at the star system he was indicating. They all knew this story. The colony held for 6 weeks, Quan continued. Not only did they survive, but they destroyed the entire Raider fleet and captured their leader. How do you think 200 humans defeated 50,000 Raiders? Nixaland's compound eyes focused intently. The reports from that battle never made logical sense. The mathematical models showed human defeat was certain. And yet we won, Quan said simply. Just as we won the trade war against the merchant guilds despite having smaller fleets. Just as we terraformed the dead zone worlds that every other species said were impossible to settle. Just as we have solved every major problem we have encountered since joining the galactic community. He looked around the room at each alien representative. Humanity has never failed when we set our minds to accomplish something. We sent one ship because one ship is what we need. The room was quiet now, but it was a different kind of silence. Instead of shock and anger, there was confusion and uncertainty. The aliens didn't understand what the human meant, but they couldn't ignore his confidence. Thexara's scales had returned to their normal green color. If this single ship fails, the swarm will continue toward our homeworlds. It will not fail, Quan replied. How can you be so certain? Admiral Quan sat back down in his chair. Because it was built by humans, crewed by humans, and designed to solve this specific problem. That is enough. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the focus had shifted. Instead of arguing about the human contribution, the aliens began planning how to coordinate their massive fleets with whatever the mysterious human ship might do. None of them really believed one ship could make a difference, but Admiral Quan's quiet confidence was unsettling. As the meeting ended and the various representatives prepared to return to their homeworlds, Thexara approached the human admiral. I hope you are right about this ship of yours, she said. Many lives depend on its success. Quan looked at her with calm, dark eyes. The indomitable will not disappoint you, but I suggest your fleets prepare for a battle unlike anything they have seen before. The Velkin commander studied his face, looking for some hint of what he meant. She found none. Admiral Quan left the station and returned to his transport ship. As his vessel jumped to hyperspace toward Earth, he finally allowed himself a small smile. The other species would learn soon enough why humanity only needed one ship. But first, that ship had to be prepared for the most important battle in galactic history. The indomitable will floated in the darkness of space near Earth's moon. From the outside, the ship looked ordinary. It was about 800 meters long with a sleek, simple design. Its hull was dark gray metal with no decorations or bright colors. Compared to the massive alien warships with their glowing weapons and fancy armor, the human vessel seemed plain and boring. Captain Li Dongwu stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars through the main view screen. He was a man of average height with graying hair and calm eyes. His uniform was clean but simple, with only a few rank badges to show his authority. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. "Captain," said Dr. Park Hee-jin from her science station, "all systems are running normally. The Cascade Drive is operating within safe parameters." Dr. Park was a small woman with short black hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had spent 10 years developing the theoretical physics that made their ship special. Her fingers moved quickly across her control panel as she checked readings that would confuse most people in the galaxy. "Good," Captain Lee replied. "How long until we reach the assembly point?" 18 hours at current speed, answered Commander Kim Tae-sung from the tactical station. He was younger than the captain, with sharp features and quick movements. Before joining the ship's crew, he had been a military strategist who studied alien warfare methods. "The alien fleets are already gathering in the Kepler system." Engineer Choi Mi-ra looked up from her engineering console. She was a cheerful woman who always seemed to be smiling, even when working with the most dangerous technology humans had ever created. "The ship's special systems are ready, Captain. We can activate Protocol Omega whenever you give the order." Captain Lee nodded and walked to his command chair. "Before we join the battle, I want everyone to remember why we're here." Computer, display Earth history files. The main view screen changed to show images from Earth's past. The crew watched as pictures appeared showing their planet's long journey to the stars. "Humanity has always faced impossible challenges," Captain Lee said as the images changed. "When our ancestors first looked up at the stars, everyone said space travel was impossible. The distances were too great, the technology was too complex. Other species had tried and failed for thousands of years." The screen showed early human spacecraft, crude metal cylinders that barely reached their own moon. Then came better ships and eventually the first vessels that could travel to other star systems. "But humans didn't give up," the captain continued. "We studied the problem from every angle. We tested new ideas. We learned from our mistakes. While other species found ancient technology or inherited knowledge from older civilizations, we built everything ourselves from the ground up." Dr. Park smiled as she watched the historical footage. "I remember reading about the first faster-than-light experiments. The Vulcan scientists said our theories were wrong. The Hyver computers calculated that our mathematics were impossible. Yet here we are, traveling between stars just like them," Commander Kim added. "Maybe even better than them in some ways." The view screen now showed scenes from humanity's early years in galactic civilization. There were images of the first human colonies, the first meetings with alien species, and the first conflicts. "Tell them about the trade war," Engineer Choi suggested. "That's my favorite story." Captain Lee's eyes grew distant as he remembered. 5 years ago, the merchant guilds decided humans were too successful at business. They said we were stealing profits from species that had been trading for centuries. So they banned human ships from most spaceports and refused to buy our goods. The screen showed massive alien trading fleets, thousands of ships carrying goods between star systems. Next to them, human merchant vessels looked tiny and insignificant. "The guilds had 10,000 trading ships," Dr. Park said. "We had less than 500. By every economic model, they should have destroyed our trade network within months. Instead, we created something new," Captain Lee explained. While the guilds relied on traditional trade routes and old agreements, humans developed direct relationships with individual planets. We offered better prices, faster delivery, and products designed specifically for each customer. Commander Kim pulled up tactical displays showing trade route maps. The guilds were so focused on competing with each other that they never noticed humans building a completely different kind of network. By the time they realized what was happening, human merchants controlled 30% of galactic trade. "The war ended when the guilds begged us for a peace treaty," Engineer Choi laughed. "They never understood that humans don't just copy what others do. We find our own way." The historical display changed again, showing images of the Siege of New Sol. This was a human colony world that had been attacked by space pirates called the Raider clans. 200 defenders, Captain Lee said quietly. "No warships. No orbital weapons, just a small group of human colonists with basic equipment." The screen showed 50,000 raider ships surrounding the planet. Their vessels were designed for war, with heavy armor and powerful weapons. The human colony had only a few defensive installations and some mining equipment. The raiders had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics, Dr. Park explained. Overwhelming force and brutal attacks. Every military expert said the colony would fall in hours. But the colonists didn't fight the way raiders expected, Commander Kim continued. Instead of trying to match their firepower, the humans used the planet itself as a weapon. The images showed how human engineers had modified mining equipment to create traps and ambushes. They used their knowledge of the planet's geography to predict where raiders would land. They turned civilian factories into weapon production facilities overnight. The raiders kept adapting their tactics, Captain Lee said. Every time they found a way around one human defense, the colonists created something new. After 6 weeks of fighting, the raider fleet was completely destroyed and their leader was captured. How did the colonists manage that? Asked a young crew member who had never heard the full story. Engineer Choi grinned. They convinced the raider leader to come down to the planet's surface for surrender negotiations. Then they collapsed the entire meeting site into an underground cave system they had been digging for weeks. The other species called it cheating, Dr. Park added. They said humans didn't fight fairly. War isn't about being fair, Captain Lee replied. It's about solving problems. Humans are very good at solving problems. The view screen now displayed images from the Great Terraforming Project. These were worlds that had been declared dead and worthless by every alien species. The planets had poisonous atmospheres, extreme temperatures, or other conditions that made life impossible. The Galactic Council said these worlds could never support civilization, Captain Lee explained. The environmental conditions were too harsh. The cost of changing them would be too high. It would take thousands of years to make them livable. The images showed human terraforming ships working on dead planets. Massive machines changed atmospheric composition, while others adjusted planetary temperature. Genetic engineers created new plants and animals designed to thrive in hostile conditions. Humans terraformed 47 worlds in less than 20 years, Dr. Park said proudly. We didn't just make them livable. We made them beautiful. The screen showed the finished planets, green worlds with blue skies and flowing rivers. Cities built by humans dotted the landscapes, surrounded by forests and farmland that had never existed before. Other species are still trying to understand how we did it, Commander Kim noted. They keep asking for the secret technology or the ancient knowledge we must have used. There was no secret, Captain Lee said simply. We studied the problems, designed solutions, and worked until we succeeded. That's how humans do things. Engineer Choi stood up from her station and walked to the captain's chair. Sir, should I tell them about the real reason we only brought one ship? Captain Lee looked around at his crew. These people had trained for years to operate the indomitable will. They understood things about the universe that most beings couldn't even imagine. The truth is, he said slowly, this ship represents everything humanity has learned about science and engineering. Every discovery, every breakthrough, every new understanding we've gained in our journey to the stars. Dr. Park activated another display showing the ship's internal structure. The Cascade Drive doesn't just move us through space. It temporarily changes the rules of physics in a small area around our ship. What do you mean changes the rules? The young crew member asked. Think about it this way, Dr. Park explained. Every species in the galaxy has learned to work within the laws of physics as they exist. They build faster ships, stronger weapons, and better shields, but they all follow the same basic rules. Commander Kim joined the explanation. Humans discovered something different. We learned that the laws of physics aren't as fixed as everyone believes. Under certain conditions, you can actually modify how the universe works in a small space. For about 17 minutes, Engineer Choi added with excitement, our ship can impose human scientific understanding on the space around us. That means our weapons work the way we designed them to work, regardless of what should be possible. The space around Kepler Prime looked like a metal forest. Hundreds of thousands of alien warships filled the darkness, their lights creating artificial constellations. The massive Vulcan heavy cruisers formed the main battle line, each one over 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Behind them, swarms of smaller Haver drone fighters moved in perfect geometric patterns. Admiral Thexara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Vengeance of Scales. Through the main view screen, she could see the enormous Allied fleet spreading out in all directions. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. All fleet commanders report ready for battle, announced her communications officer. The Brutok battleships are taking position on our left flank. The Zephyrian nature ships are spreading their route networks through the asteroid field. The Prism light cruisers have charged their focusing arrays. Thexara's yellow eyes scanned the tactical display. Every ship was in position according to their battle plan. Every weapon system was charged and ready. It was a perfect military formation that should be able to defeat any enemy. "What about the human ship?" she asked. Her tactical officer checked his readings. "The indomitable will is holding position at the rear of the formation, approximately 50,000 kilometers behind our main battle line," Thexara hissed softly. Even now, with the battle about to begin, she couldn't understand human strategy. Their single ship looked tiny compared to the massive alien fleet around it. It seemed to be hiding behind the other vessels instead of taking a fighting position. On the Hiver command vessel Logical Conclusion, General Nixolan was running final calculations. His compound eyes processed data streams from thousands of different sources while his forearms worked at multiple control panels simultaneously. "Estimated enemy force projection 2.7 million vessels," he announced to his staff in his mechanical voice. "Allied fleet strength 847,000 ships. Mathematical probability of victory 23.7%. One of his subordinates clicked nervously. "General, that probability seems low for such a large alliance fleet." "The calculations account for void swarm adaptive capabilities," Nixolan explained. "Historical data shows they become immune to repeated weapon types within 4.3 minutes of first contact. Our initial advantage will decrease rapidly as the battle progresses." He paused his calculations to look at a small display showing the human ship. "The single human vessel does not significantly alter combat mathematics. Its contribution to fleet firepower is negligible." Far at the back of the formation, Captain Li Dongwu was having a very different conversation with his crew. The bridge of the Indomitable Will was quiet and calm, unlike the frantic activity on the alien command ships. "How are our cascade systems?" he asked Dr. Park. "All generators are operating at optimal efficiency," she replied while checking her instruments. "The quantum field manipulators are synchronized and ready. We can initiate cascade protocol whenever you give the order." Commander Kim was monitoring communications from the Allied fleet. "Captain, the alien commanders are getting nervous. Admiral Thexara has requested 3 times that we move to a more forward position. Let them worry about their own formations," Captain Lee said calmly. "We'll move when it's time." Engineer Choi looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. "Sir, the cascade drive is performing better than our original specifications. We might be able to maintain the effect for up to 20 minutes instead of 17. "Good," the captain replied. "We may need every second." Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the Allied fleet. On every ship, sensors detected the same thing: a massive disturbance in hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The void swarm had arrived. They came out of hyperspace like a black tide. Millions of geometric ships emerged from the darkness, their hulls so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. Each vessel was roughly the size of a human destroyer, but they moved with perfect coordination that no normal fleet could achieve. "By the ancient scales," whispered Thexara as she watched the enemy fleet deploy. The swarm ships spread across space in patterns that hurt to look at. They moved as a single organism, flowing around obstacles and forming attack formations without any visible communication. Nixolan's calculations went wild as his computers tried to count the enemy vessels. Revised estimate 4.2 million swarm ships. Fleet formation suggests hive mind control with quantum-linked consciousness. The swarm didn't waste time with communications or demands for surrender. They simply began their attack. The first wave hit the Zephyrian nature ships on the Allied fleet's right flank. The tree-like aliens had grown massive root networks through the asteroid field, turning the space rocks into weapons they could fire at enemies. Their organic ships launched thousands of seed pods that burst into flowering vines meant to wrap around enemy hulls. For a few minutes, the nature weapons seemed to work. Swarm ships became tangled in alien plants and crashed into asteroids. But then something changed. The second wave of swarm vessels passed through the same attacks without any effect. Somehow they had become immune to the Zephyrian weapons. "Impossible," breathed the Zephyrian fleet commander. "How can they ignore our root bonds? No technology can break the connection between a tree and its children." But the void swarm ships continued forward, completely unaffected by attacks that should have destroyed them. The Brutok battleships opened fire next. Their massive plasma cannons had enough power to melt through small moons. The first volley destroyed dozens of swarm vessels, their dark hulls glowing white-hot before exploding into debris. General Vextar roared with satisfaction. See how they burn. The Brutok Empire's weapons are too powerful for their adaptations. His celebration lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. That's how long it took for the swarm to analyze and adapt to Brutok plasma technology. The second volley of plasma bolts passed harmlessly through enemy ships as if they were firing at empty space. "What sorcery is this?" Vextar demanded. "Our weapons struck them directly." His science officer checked the readings 3 times before answering. "General, the enemy ships appear to have modified their hull composition. They are now immune to plasma-based weapons." The pattern repeated across the entire Allied fleet. The Hyver drones launched swarms of smart missiles that destroyed hundreds of swarm ships before becoming completely ineffective. The Prism light cruisers used focused energy beams that worked perfectly until the swarm learned to absorb and redirect the same energy back at them. Within an hour of fighting, the Allied fleet's advantages had turned into disadvantages. Weapons that had worked at the beginning of the battle now helped the enemy instead of harming them. "This is Admiral Thexera to all fleet commanders," she broadcast on the emergency channel. "We are experiencing total weapons failure. Repeat, all primary weapons have become ineffective against enemy forces." The alien fleet began falling back in disorder. Ships that had been in perfect formation now scattered as captains tried desperately to find weapons that still worked. Some vessels attempted ramming attacks, only to find that swarm ships could somehow phase through solid matter when they needed to avoid collisions. "Fleet casualties approaching 40%, reported Nixolan, his usually calm mechanical voice showing strain. "Enemy adaptation rate exceeds all previous calculations. Mathematical model indicates complete fleet destruction within 2.7 hours. On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, Captain Lee watched the battle's progress with calm attention. His crew monitored the communications from the Allied fleet, listening to reports of weapon failures and mounting casualties. "Captain," Commander Kim said, "Admiral Thexara is requesting immediate human assistance. She's asking where our reinforcements are." Captain Lee activated the communication system. "Admiral Thexara, this is Captain Lee. Reinforcements are not coming. As we told your council, Earth sent 1 ship. 1 ship? Thexara's voice cracked with desperation. "We're losing hundreds of vessels every minute. What can your single ship do against millions of enemies?" "We can solve the problem," Captain Lee replied simply. "How?" "Our weapons don't work anymore. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at them." Captain Lee looked at Dr. Park, who nodded readiness from her science station. "Admiral, the swarm adapts to weapons that follow normal physics. They analyze how each technology works and then modify themselves to become immune." "Yes, we know that," Thexara shouted. "That's why we're losing." "But they can't adapt to weapons that don't follow normal physics," Captain Lee continued. "They can't become immune to technologies that operate under different natural laws." There was silence on the communication channel for several seconds. Then Thexara asked in a confused voice, "What do you mean, different natural laws?" Dr. Park activated her cascade drive systems. Throughout the ship, exotic energy patterns began building in carefully designed field generators. "Captain, Cascade Protocol is ready for implementation." Engineer Choi's hands flew over her controls as she prepared the ship's transformation systems. "All hidden weapon ports are prepared for deployment. Armor reconfiguration is standing by." Commander Kim studied the tactical display showing the swarm's attack patterns. "Sir, I've identified what appears to be their central command structure. It's a massive construct about the size of a small moon, positioned." The Indomitable Will cut through the void swarm like a ghost ship sailing through solid rock. Enemy vessels that should have stopped it simply passed through its hull without causing any damage. The human ship existed in a bubble of altered reality where different laws of physics applied. On the bridge, Dr. Park watched her instruments with intense concentration. "Cascade field holding steady at 97% efficiency. Local space-time is responding to human physics parameters instead of universal constants." Captain Lee studied the tactical display as his ship penetrated deeper into enemy territory. "How much further to their command structure?" "Approximately 200,000 kilometers, Commander Kim replied. "But Captain, we're detecting something unusual. The swarm ships are trying to adapt to our presence." Through the view screen, they could see void ships changing their approach patterns. Some attempted to match the human ship's dimensional phase. Others fired weapons that seemed to bend space around them. But nothing worked. The cascade field made the Indomitable Will immune to technologies based on normal physics. Engineer Choi's fingers danced across her control panels as she monitored the ship's transformation systems. All primary weapons are now deployed. The cascade has enhanced their effectiveness by 340% above theoretical maximum. What does that mean in simple terms? Asked Communications Officer Yoon Jae-hyun, a young man who was still learning about their advanced technology. Dr. Park looked up from her console with excitement. It means our weapons can now do things that should be impossible. Energy beams that ignore shields. Missiles that travel backward through time to hit targets before we fire them. Gravitational weapons that can make enemy ships too heavy to move. The cascade field doesn't just protect us, Captain Lee explained. It lets us impose human scientific understanding on the space around our ship. For the next 18 minutes, our weapons work the way we designed them to work, regardless of what the universe says should be possible. The human ship's weapons began firing as it approached concentrations of swarm vessels. Beams of pure energy passed through enemy shields as if they didn't exist. Missiles appeared inside swarm ships without traveling through the space between. Some weapons seemed to destroy their targets retroactively, making enemy vessels disappear before the weapons were even fired. Admiral Thexara watched from her flagship with amazement and growing hope. By the ancient scales, the human weapons are actually working. They're destroying swarm ships faster than our entire fleet combined. On the Hiver command vessel, General Nixolan's computers struggled to analyze what they were seeing. Mathematical impossibility detected. Human weapons are operating outside known physics parameters. Calculating probability of observed effects. Error. Calculation impossible. General, one of his subordinates clicked nervously. Should we assist the human vessel? Negative, Nixolan replied after several seconds of processing. Our weapons would interfere with whatever field effect they are generating. We must observe and learn. The indomitable will continued its advance through the swarm formation. Behind it, thousands of destroyed enemy vessels drifted as silent debris, but ahead lay millions more void ships, and at the center of their formation, the massive command structure that coordinated their hive mind. Captain, Commander Kim announced, I'm detecting changes in the swarm's behavior patterns. Their coordination is becoming less perfect as we destroy more ships. Dr. Park nodded as she studied her readings. Each swarm vessel we eliminate weakens their quantum link network. The command structure is having to work harder to maintain control over the remaining ships. Good, Captain Lee said. That means our strategy is working. The swarm's greatest strength is their perfect coordination. If we can disrupt that, they become just another large fleet. The human ship reached the inner formation of the swarm, where the largest and most dangerous enemy vessels waited. These ships were different from the others, bigger, more heavily armed, and covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change. These must be their command vessels, Engineer Choi observed. They're trying to analyze our cascade field. Through the communication system, they could hear the panicked reports from the Allied fleet behind them. The swarm ships that weren't engaging the human vessel were becoming confused and disorganized. Some fired at empty space, others collided with their own allies. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable was beginning to break down. Indomitable will, this is Admiral Thexara, came the transmission. Whatever you're doing, it's working. The swarm ships in our sector are acting randomly. They're not adapting to our weapons anymore. The quantum link disruption is spreading, Dr. Park explained to her crew. As we destroy more ships, the entire network becomes unstable. Suddenly, the ship shuddered as something struck its cascade field. On the view screen, they could see one of the large command vessels had fired a weapon that actually affected them. Hull breach on Deck 7. Engineer Choi reported. Whatever they hit us with, it partially penetrated our field. Impossible, Dr. Park said, checking her readings. Nothing should be able to affect us while the cascade is active. Commander Kim studied the tactical display. Captain, that command ship is different from the others. It's generating some kind of counterfield that interferes with our cascade effect. Captain Lee realized what was happening. The swarm is learning. Even though they can't adapt to our weapons, they're figuring out how to disrupt the field that makes those weapons work. More command ships began firing the new counterfield weapons. Each hit weakened the indomitable will's cascade protection. The human ship was still nearly invulnerable, but the margin of safety was shrinking. Cascade field efficiency down to 89%, Dr. Park announced. If it drops below 75%, we'll start losing our physics advantages. How much time do we have? Captain Lee asked. At current decay rate, approximately 12 minutes before cascade collapse. Captain Lee looked at the massive command structure still 150,000 kilometers away. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon and bristling with weapons and communication arrays. Reaching it and destroying it in 12 minutes seemed impossible. There's another option, Dr. Park said quietly. We could initiate a cascade resonance burst. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Engineer Choi spoke first. A resonance burst would propagate the cascade effect through the swarm's own quantum network. It would affect their entire fleet simultaneously instead of just the ships around us. But it would also overload our cascade generators, Commander Kim added grimly. The ship wouldn't survive the energy release. Captain Lee considered the options. They could continue their current course, probably reach the command structure and maybe destroy it before their cascade field collapsed. But that would only affect the swarm ships in this system. The rest of their vast fleet would continue attacking other worlds, or they could sacrifice their ship to cascade the entire swarm network, potentially destroying millions of enemy vessels across multiple star systems. Captain, Communications Officer Yoon said, I'm receiving a message from the swarm command structure. They're trying to communicate with us? Captain Lee asked with surprise. It appears so, sir. The message is strange. The communication came through as a mix of electronic sounds and mathematical symbols. Dr. Park worked to translate it while the ship continued, fighting its way through increasingly desperate enemy formations. I think I understand it, she finally said. The message is asking, what are you? They want to know how we're doing what we're doing. Captain Lee smiled grimly. Tell them we're human. That should be explanation enough. Dr. Park sent the reply through their communication system. The response came back immediately, a flood of mathematical equations and scientific formulas. They're trying to analyze our cascade technology, she translated. They want to understand how we change the laws of physics. Can they figure it out? Commander Kim asked. Not in the time we have left, Dr. Park replied. Human cascade theory is based on principles they've never encountered. They're trying to apply their own scientific understanding to something that operates on completely different assumptions. The human ship was now only 100,000 kilometers from the command structure, but the enemy counterfields were getting stronger. The cascade field efficiency had dropped to 82% and was falling faster. Captain, Engineer Choi said, we need to make a decision soon. If we're going to attempt the resonance burst, we need to begin preparations now. Captain Lee opened a communication channel to the entire Allied fleet. All ships, this is Captain Lee. We are about to attempt something that has never been tried before. If it works, the battle will be over. If it fails, continue the fight and remember that humans tried their best. Captain Lee. Admiral Thexara's voice came back immediately. What are you planning? We're going to cascade the entire swarm network at once, he replied. It should destroy their quantum link consciousness and leave them unable to coordinate or adapt. Should? She asked with alarm. You don't know if it will work? No, Captain Lee admitted. But that's never stopped humans before. Dr. Park began the final preparations for cascade resonance. The burst of light from the indomitable will was visible across the entire Kepler system. For 30 seconds, the human ship blazed brighter than the system's star, releasing energies that existed outside normal physics. The cascade resonance spread outward in waves that traveled faster than light itself. Admiral Thexara shielded her eyes as the brilliant explosion filled her view screen. What in the name of the ancient scales? The wave of human physics struck the swarm fleet like an invisible tsunami. Ship after ship suddenly found their impossible technologies failing. Vessels that had been able to adapt to any weapon now discovered their adaptation systems simply stopped working. Ships that could phase through solid matter became solid and crashed into each other. On the Hyver command vessel, General Nixalan's computers went wild as they tried to process what was happening. Mathematical impossibility confirmed across all sensor arrays. Enemy fleet experiencing total system failure. Cause unknown energy cascade propagating through quantum communication network. The effect wasn't limited to the swarm ships in the Kepler system. Through their quantum-linked consciousness, the cascade spread to every swarm vessel in the galaxy. On 100 different battlefields, millions of void ships suddenly found themselves subject to normal physics for the first time in their existence. Ships that had been firing weapons backward through time discovered that time only moved in one direction. Vessels that ignored the conservation of energy found their reactors overloading. The swarm's greatest advantage, their ability to operate outside natural law, had become their greatest weakness. Dr. Park watched her instruments as the cascade reached critical resonance. 30 seconds to system overload, she announced calmly, even as alarms sounded throughout the ship. The bridge of the indomitable will was filled with the light of overloading cascade generators. Energy patterns that had never existed before danced through the air like living lightning. The ship itself was being torn apart by the forces it had unleashed. "Captain," Engineer Choi reported, "cascade resonance is propagating successfully through the swarm network. Estimated time to complete network collapse 15 seconds. Captain Lee gripped his command chair as the ship shook violently. Through the view screen, he could see swarm vessels beginning to drift helplessly in space. Their perfect formations were breaking apart as ships collided with debris from their own destroyed allies. "Hull breaches on all decks," Commander Kim announced. "Structural integrity at 23% and falling." "It doesn't matter," Captain Lee replied. "We just need to hold together for a few more seconds." The cascade reached its final phase. Across the galaxy, the swarm's hive mind shattered like glass. Individual ships that had never operated independently suddenly found themselves alone and confused. Without their quantum link coordination, they began attacking each other, or simply drifting in random directions. "Cascade complete," Dr. Park said with satisfaction. "The swarm's collective consciousness has been permanently disrupted." 3 seconds later, the indomitable will exploded. The blast was seen throughout the Allied fleet. Where the human ship had been, now there was only expanding debris and fading energy patterns. But around them, millions of swarm ships floated dead in space, their dark hulls no longer absorbing light, their weapon systems silent forever. Admiral Thexara stared at the empty space where the human vessel had sacrificed itself. "By all the ancient scales," she whispered. They actually did it. One ship destroyed an entire galactic threat. The Allied fleet moved carefully through the debris field that had once been the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. Swarm ships that had seemed invincible hours earlier now offered no resistance as alien boarding. Parties explored their technology. General, Nick Solin's report to the Galactic Council would later become required, reading at military academies across the galaxy. Human tactical philosophy fundamentally differs from all known military doctrine. Where other species seek to match enemy capabilities, humans seek to change the rules of engagement entirely. 3 days after the battle, the surviving human crew members were recovered from an emergency pod that had been ejected just before the ship's destruction. Captain Lee had made sure his people survived, even if he couldn't save his ship. The rescue vessel that picked them up was commanded by Admiral Thexara herself. As Dr. Park, Commander Kim, Engineer Choi, and Communications Officer Yoon were brought aboard the Velkin flagship, the alien admiral greeted them with deep respect. "The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid," she told them. "But I must ask, how did you know your plan would work? You risked everything on untested technology." Dr. Park smiled tiredly. "That's what humans do. We build theories, test them, and push them to their limits. Other species might have spent years debating whether cascade resonance was possible. Humans built the technology and tried it. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened again at Nexus Prime. This time, the mood was very different from their previous emergency meeting. Representatives from all 12 allied species filled the chamber. But now they looked at the human delegation with new understanding. Admiral Kwan sat in the same chair he had occupied during the crisis, but the aliens around him no longer questioned human contributions to galactic defense. "The final casualty reports have been compiled," announced the council chairman, a dignified prism whose crystal body reflected rainbow colors. "Total swarm vessels destroyed 4.7 million ships. Total allied losses 23,000 vessels. The threat to galactic civilization has been permanently eliminated." The chamber was quiet as everyone absorbed those numbers. The swarm had outnumbered the allied fleet by more than 5-1, yet they had been completely destroyed while allied losses remained relatively light. "How?" asked General Vextar, his massive frame leaning forward with curiosity. "I have studied the battle records, but I do not understand how one human ship accomplished what our entire combined fleet could not." Admiral Kwan stood up to address the council. The answer lies in how different species approach problems. Most of you develop technology by building on what already exists. You make faster ships, stronger weapons, better shields, but you work within established physical laws. He gestured to a holographic display showing the battle's progression. Humans approach technology differently. We start by understanding the fundamental principles behind everything. Then we ask, what if these principles could be changed? Dr. Park, who had been invited to attend as an expert witness, added her explanation. The cascade drive doesn't just manipulate space and time. It temporarily imposes human scientific understanding on local reality. For a brief period, our theories about how the universe should work become more true than the universe's own laws. Thexara's scales shifted to show deep interest, but surely such technology requires massive resources and enormous ships to implement. No, Admiral Kwan replied. That's another difference in human thinking. We don't solve problems by building bigger solutions. We solve them by understanding them better. The indomitable will was only 800 meters long because that was all the space we needed for the cascade generators. General Nixalon's compound eyes focused intently on the human admiral. You knew from the beginning that one ship would be sufficient? We knew that one properly designed ship could accomplish what millions of conventional vessels could not, Kwan confirmed. The swarm's strength came from their ability to adapt to normal technology. They couldn't adapt to technology that operated on principles they had never encountered. The council chairman's crystal form pulsed with colored light, the prism equivalent of nodding thoughtfully. This explains many other human achievements that have puzzled the galactic community. Your success in the trade war, your terraforming projects, your military victories against superior numbers. Exactly, Admiral Kwan said. In each case, humans didn't try to match our opponent's advantages. We changed the nature of the competition itself. Over the following months, the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy began to shift. Instead of viewing humans as a minor species with unusual luck, other civilizations started sending their best scientists and strategists to study human methodology. The Vulcans established an exchange program to learn human military philosophy. The Hivers requested access to human scientific papers about theoretical physics. Even the proud Brutox asked for human advisors to help them think about problems in new ways. Dr. Park found herself appointed as the first human director of galactic scientific research, a position created specifically to help other species understand human approaches to problem solving. Commander Kim became an instructor at the galaxy's most prestigious military academy, teaching courses on asymmetric strategy and rule-breaking tactics. Engineer Choi was assigned to lead a joint project between human and alien engineers, working to develop new technologies that combined human theoretical understanding with alien practical experience. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed impossible challenges. Before the Battle of Kepler Prime, species facing overwhelming problems would often surrender or retreat. Now they asked a different question: what would humans do? The answer was usually the same: find a different way to think about the problem.